Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah. I am a nutritional consultant for Choices Market at 3 locations in North Vancouver, Cambie, and Kerrisdale. Today, our webinar is Heal Your Past, How to Take Control of Your Life Using EMDR Therapy. Our guest speaker tonight is Tricia Veltri. Uh, it's my pleasure to introduce Tricia. Tricia is a certified Canadian counselor and owner-operator of Core Level Healing Therapy. Tricia has a master's degree in counseling and 10 years experience working in the mental health and addiction field. Tricia specializes in helping individuals heal from toxic relationships, trauma, PTSD, and complex PTSD. Tricia is an EMDR certified trauma specialist and has helped hundreds of people heal from trauma, one memory at a time, so they can live their best lives. Before I hand over to Tricia, I'm going over a few things. One is whoever, those who attended in this webinar, you will receive a nutrition box like that. In order to receive this, at the end of this webinar, you will get a survey link by email, and you just need to fill out your address, and then we will mail it to you approximately 1 month after this event. And another thing, if you have nutrition question, you can visit your local Choices Market and talk to in-store nutritionists. So now, and also for the Tricia presentation, you can enter your question in the chat box, and those are answered at the end of this presentation. So welcome, Tricia. So now,
Hi.
hi, and now the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Sarah and Choices, for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm very excited. I was just telling Sarah, actually, that this is my first time that I've ever gone live on YouTube. So this is new for me, and I'm excited, but please bear with me. So again, welcome to my presentation. So it is called How to Get Past Your Past Using EMDR Therapy. So many people have struggled with trauma. And so maybe this sounds like you. So this workshop is for you. If you've ever struggled with upsetting emotions, memories, anxiety, that won't really go away in your life as a result of a traumatic memory that's happened to you. Maybe trauma has begun to affect your relationships. Maybe you notice a pattern in relationships. Maybe you choose men who are wrong for you. Maybe you is affecting your work life. Maybe it's affecting life with your kids. Maybe your trauma is affecting your general enjoyment in life. Um, Maybe you feel alone in your life, as though no one really understands what you're going through. I've had a lot of clients that just said that, like, sometimes they just think they're going crazy. They don't even know what's going on with them. They just know that they don't trust people. They don't feel safe. They have these symptoms. Maybe you've tried traditional therapies in the past. So lots of people have said, I've done lots of therapy in the past. I've tried it. I've talked about it. They've tried CBT. And yes, it helps. But for some people, it's only a Band-Aid fix. So EMDR therapy can really help you get to the root issue of whatever you're dealing with. So if you're ready to leave the past behind and heal from your trauma, EMDR therapy might be the type of therapy for you. So I'm going to actually just share my screen. So again, just bear with me here. I'm gonna just share. I have a presentation. Here. All right, there we go. All right, so once again, I'll just reintroduce myself. So very quickly, Sarah did such an amazing job at introducing me. So my name again is Tricia Veltri. I have 10 years experience as a counselor and a psychotherapist. I spent the majority of my training working in mental health and addictions. I worked at a addictions treatment center in Kelowna for about 10 years of my life, where we were really primarily focused on healing addictions by looking at people's trauma. And that's where I was introduced to EMDR. I'm the owner and operator of Core Level Healing Therapy in Kelowna, BC. And I've owned that for about 4 years now, where, as Sarah said, I specialize in working with individuals with toxic relationship patterns, PTSD, trauma, complex trauma. Those are my main areas of specialty. And I'd actually like to tell you a personal experience about my own EMDR story. So my own EMDR story, I was about 4 years ago, I had a coworker who actually committed suicide, and I was the first person to actually see her, and I was the first person on the scene. And it was a pretty traumatic experience, not to say the least. And after that experience, I can remember going home that night and just not being able to get these images out of my mind. I'd close my eyes and I would just see the same image over and over and over in my head. And no matter what I did, tried to forget about it, tried my breathing exercises, I couldn't get that image out of my mind. And along with that trauma, and what happened to me is I had a lot of negative beliefs about myself. There's a lot of guilt. I kept on thinking, well, what if I had done something? Maybe if I talked to her a week ago, what if I did this? Well, what if I had arrived there, 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early, an hour early? Like, what if? And so there's just a lot of what ifs and a lot of guilt that I had put on myself. And I had managed my symptoms pretty well. After about, a few months, I started to really sort of dread going to work and seeing my coworkers, and they'd always ask me, "How are you doing? Is everything okay?" And I thought I was fine, and I was, but and all at the same time, I was, having a lot of anxiety and isolation, and I really hated going to work and everything that kind of reminded me about my coworker, because she worked with me. Um, so after about a month or so, one of my other coworkers suggested that I try EMDR, and this at this point, I hadn't done my training. I still probably in my school, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a shot. I didn't really have high hopes. I'd heard about it before, and I was pretty hesitant. And when I heard that I would have to spend an hour really focusing and thinking about the trauma, I really dreaded it. It was the last thing I really wanted to do, was to kind of bring that all up again. But I did it, and the results were absolutely amazing. And I think that's why to this day I can sit here and talk about it, because to me, it just feels like a memory. It feels like a bad memory, but the intensity, the emotions, the guilt, all of that is gone. And after doing, for me, just one session, and that's not always the case with everybody. There's many circumstances, but to how long it takes, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, it was quite amazing of how it just it didn't bother me in the way that it did anymore. So after that, I was a believer, and I got my training, and since then I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people with traumas way more severe than mine. And it's just been an amazing experience to see, how EMDR has really changed people's lives from going to complete, isolation and, the symptoms of PTSD to just living happy, healthy lives. So I'm really excited to share a little bit more about this with all of you today. Here. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of stats on trauma. So it is estimated that 76% of Canadians report having experienced a traumatic event during their lifetime. So that's a pretty high number. So I think one of the things with trauma is that no one's immune to it. No one expects that it's going to happen. And when it does happen, we're not prepared for it. However, it is estimated about 8% of Canadians who experience a traumatic event develop PTSD. So that's a really important thing to know, is that not everybody who experiences a trauma in their life is going to have what we would call clinical PTSD. So, but it's not to say that they can't have some or more symptoms of what PTSD would be. And to the person who's experiencing it, it's still just as disturbing and, affecting their life as someone who has like full on PTSD. What I'm going to talk about today is the way that I treat trauma is to really understand that when I look at trauma, that I really look at a holistic version of treating the individual. So to better understand trauma, we need to understand that trauma affects the entire person. So first and foremost, it affects the body. So I'm just going to adjust my seat here. So it affects our bodies. So when a traumatic event occurs, the way to best explain it, it gets stuck into our nervous system, specifically the brain. And we're going to be talking a lot about the brain, because the brain is a big part about trauma. And so it affects, so our brains have different parts, and trauma really affects two different parts of our brain, which again, we'll get into a little bit more after. So other things that people can experience in the body are feelings of hypervigilance, very noticeable body reactions. So things like pounding of the heart, shortness of breath after being reminded of the trauma, hard time falling or staying asleep. That's very common. Getting started very easily, having hypervigilance, very common. Just feeling on guard all the time. Sitting with, not being able, having to sit by a door. Just sort of just your body just always feels on edge, like it's on. It's just your fight or flight system. It just feels activated at all times. So going on to emotions. So along with a trauma, so when we've experienced a traumatic event, we have emotions that also kind of get trapped in our nervous system as well. So common emotions that a lot of people feel are like kind of the yucky emotions, I call them. So emotions like fear, anxiety, shame, guilt. So a lot of people kind of get like stuck within these negative emotions, and they don't really know how to break free from them, and they sometimes these emotions will really like hijack the ourselves and our body. So the next thing with is our thoughts. So within our thoughts, when we've experienced a traumatic event, a lot of time, well, I'd say not even a lot, most of the times the person has associated a negative belief about themselves or the world attached to that event. So beliefs could range from, there's hundreds to thousands of different beliefs that people could have, but common ones that I've heard are things like, I'm not safe, it was my fault, I should have done something, I deserve that, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. So the negative thoughts can, like I said, can range from anything, but a lot of times, so we've attached a negative belief to that event that's maybe actually skewed of what actually reality is. And the last way that I look at trauma is like how it affects our relationships. So like I said, so a lot of times people who've gone through trauma in their life, they might isolate themselves from friends or family. They don't feel connected to people, they don't feel safe with people. um, Certain people may choose partners that maybe you're recreating traumatic childhood patterns that they've had in their lives with um, you know parental figures that were maybe abusive, or um, things like that. So let's go on here. Oh, wrong thing. So we're going to look at the definition of trauma. Um, oh, one sec here. It's just, sorry, my view is not the way that I want it. Sorry about that. So the definition of trauma. So a traumatic event, a traumatic event is defined as being exposed to death, threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, or actual or threatened sexual violence. So it's really important, like I said earlier, that not all traumatic events cause psychological trauma. So there's a really important formula that I like to always go over with my clients. So again, like you're not, just because you've necessarily had a traumatic event happen to you, and that's why there's many examples of people can experience the same event. I mean, let's, for example, say a car accident, and maybe one person has some symptoms of PTSD or psychological trauma, and the other person, they're maybe shooken up about it, but they seem fine. So the definition is, so you need exposure to a traumatic event, and then plus not completing the limbic response or fully digesting the experience. And we're going to talk a lot about that in the next few slides, about what's really happening in our body, in our brain, when we are experiencing a traumatic event. And then plus exposure to negative social judgment or shame, so from ourselves and from others. And this is a big one for a lot of people. So when something's happened to somebody, so like let's use the example of a car accident. So say someone had a car accident. And so the limbic response, what I mean is that, so when we've experienced a traumatic event, we have such intense adrenaline and fight or flight response comes up, that our body has all of this extra energy and emotions and stuff from the event. And usually what will happen after a traumatic event is that people will somehow, their bodies will try to expel all that energy. So a lot of people will, shake uncontrollably, or they'll cry, or they'll sob, or like they'll do some way to kind of get out that extra expelled energy. And so for sometimes people they don't allow themselves, they don't have maybe anyone to talk to about it. They have to kind of put on a brave face and just sort of like compartmentalize it and just go about on their day, or they go home. And so that what would be called sort of not really digesting the experience. And then negative social responses is like the responses we get from our friends or family. So maybe something happened and, you know, it was like it was your fault, or you were blamed, or us ourselves have a very negative view about ourselves, about what we did. And then that equals the likelihood that, you know, trauma can be increased in an individual, trauma symptoms. And then, like I said, so PTSD is something that happens with people that have experienced a traumatic event. But again, and not everyone is going to get PTSD from experiencing a traumatic event. But a person who develops PTSD will display 4 types of symptoms. So intrusions, including continually re-experiencing the event through obtrusive thoughts or unwanted dreams. Avoiding stimuli related to the traumatic event, either consciously or unconsciously. So this is, like I said, someone that's avoiding things really bad, avoiding people, places, things, smells that all remind them of the traumatic event. So negative cognitions or mood related to oneself or the world around them. And hyperarousal, including irritability, difficulty sleeping, feeling on guard constantly. So those are some of those things that we talked about with, again, that happens in your body, in your emotions, in your thoughts, and relationships. So this is going to be important. So how traumatic experiences impact us. So I have 3 different pictures of the brain, if you can see. I don't know if you can see my little arrow. So there's what we would call the lizard brain, which includes, it's in the red there. So it includes the brainstem and the cerebellum. So this is what keeps us alive. So this is our basic primitive function as a human being. So it is responsible for our fight or flight responses, and its job is to basically keep human beings alive. So if this part is not activated, we are pretty much dead. So the next part of our brain, the purple, so this is our mammalian brain, so our limbic system. So this part is responsible for things like our emotions, our memories, our habits, our attachments, and it is where we sort of, it begins to make us more human. So it's where we have emotions, it's where our memories get stored, and this is also what sort of the amygdala, that's one of these little ones there. That's our alarm system. So our alarm system goes off and it activates the lizard brain. And then we have what we call the blue part. It's our neocortex. And this is what makes us human. This is what makes us have abstract thinking, language, thoughts. It allows us to regulate our emotions. It allows us to have love and human connection. Everything that kind of makes us humans, other than like animals. So what happens in a visual sort of way is that when we have a traumatic event happen to us, so all other, I'm sorry, that wasn't supposed to do that. All other aspects of all other parts of our brain, other than the lizard part of our brain, shut down. So in that moment, we like kind of become like nothing more than like lizards in a way. So that part of lizard brain, its only job is to keep us alive. So through 4 different responses. So fight, flight, freeze, and then there's a 4th, which is flop. And so the lizard brain is sort of scanning around, and it's like, how am I going to keep this human alive? So other parts of the brain at those moments kind of just like shut down. So if the lizard brain has kept us alive, it's done its job. So what happens a lot, which I found with my clients, is a lot of people judge afterwards. They'll judge their reactions to how they responded. They'll say, I should have done something, like I had a woman that was, in a sexual assault, and she was like, the door was right there. I could have left at any moment. I couldn't, I just froze. What's wrong with me? And so it's important to kind of know for people that like in that moment, and, unfortunately, like the lizard brain is so intense, it overrides all of those other sort of other parts of our brain. And so even in like military, that's why they continuously do their drills over and over and over and over again. And even in extensive training like that, the lizard brain can't always activate, override the lizard brain. And so when we have it, so the responses to reactions that people are having is that after the trauma's occurred, it's almost like the lizard brain, our fight or flight, and this emotional brain. So we have a memory and it doesn't get stored properly. So the memory is kind of hanging out in our kind of where our short-term working memory, rather than in the part of the brain where memories are stored. And the memory becomes activated, and the brain doesn't understand that, okay, this isn't happening to me now. This happened to me, 5 years ago, but we may have a smell or a sound, and the lizard brain becomes active. So sometimes when we think of it, it's just like we get triggered and our body thinks that we're in danger. So it's like our lizard brain from that event hasn't really calmed down. It's still like fire, flight, fight, freeze. And that's kind of where that is within the brain. Okay, here. So a good way to look at this is, and I'm going to just unshare my screen for a second so I can show you guys this, is you can sort of see on the other experience here, there's the hand model of the triune brain, which is called. I don't know if you can see my hand. So this is just a really good model. Like I really like visual things for my clients and myself. And so you kind of get an idea of what's happening in our brains by like kind of looking at a model of our hands. So if we look at our reptile brain is our sort of this part of our hand, and our limb. So this represents our basic human needs: breathing, fight or flight. And then we look at this part, our thumb, as our the limbic system, responsible for our emotions, our memories, our like amygdala, so letting us know when stress hormones, all of those sort of things. And then the top part, that represents sort of the neocortex. So these are all the things that sort of, again, make us human. So are able to regulate emotions, are able to process information, able to have connections, able to, love. And so what happens is, like, when we have a trauma, it's almost like we use the example of we flip our lid. So our neocortex kind of becomes disconnected from our emotions and our lizard brain. And so that's why in some of those moments, right, like people don't have full control of their emotions, anger, fear, and like all of those emotions that we need to regulate ourselves. So in order, when we do therapy, it's about learning how to calm down. A big part of when we do EMDR therapy, it's learning how to calm down the lizard brain and working on our emotions. and so that we can like we can start to feel safe and sort of be part of that sort of have more conscious choices in what we do rather than being just reactive to situations. So that is the how the lizard brain. So when we experience something that is overwhelming to our system, so our brain, like I said before, struggles how to process and store those memories. So due to the symptoms such as anxiety, flashbacks, nightmares, and more can occur when people experience trauma. All right. So I'm just going to take a look here at the chat. I can't see the chat on YouTube. So I'm just going to see if I can see it one moment, see if there's any questions that anyone has at the moment. Sorry, and again, I'm not being rude. I just like I said, I'm really new to YouTube. Okay, yeah, so looks like Emily, yeah, so I'll let you guys know that I will answer all of your questions. I see that, sorry, Ellie has a bunch of questions here, so I definitely will answer your questions near the end. So yeah, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to just pop them in the chat and I will get to them. I will get to them near the end. I'm just gonna go back here. All right. Sorry, back to our slide here. Okay, so this is I really like this visual. Like I said, I'm a really visual person. And so I like to really explain things really simply to my clients because, again, a lot of times when people come in and see me, their frontal lobes are not, properly functioning because they're traumatized. So people don't have the capacity to, think and process and understand things. So I like to be really simple in kind of like how I explain things to people. So I really like this. I really like this little cartoon here. So it kind of just shows this little guy, and this is like a normal guy before PTSD. He wasn't wearing a dinosaur suit. Things were okay in his life. His reptilian brain was calm. He had access to his memory. He had access to his higher mind and logic. And then something happened to him. So something traumatic happened to him, and his reptile brain became overactive. He was cut off from memories, and he kind of like lost logic and rationality, and he saw things as life or death. So now his reptilian brain has remained activated, and so he kind of like is unable to take off his dinosaur suit. So the dinosaur feels rage, terror, and doesn't see everything and sees everything as life or death. Doesn't know how to use language. It speaks animal. And so therapy, and again, using EMDR therapy allows us to recover and allows us to learn how to, first of all, giving people tools so that they can deactivate their reptilian brain and their activated limbic system, their emotional parts of their brain, so that they feel safe. And then we can go in and start like working on processing traumatic memories. The last little thing that I'm going to share about the brain is the way that memories work. So one of the questions I always get from people is like, I don't get it. Like, how does EMDR work? So I like to use, again, simple analogies. I like to think of like our brains are like a filing system. So when a new experience comes into our mind, our brain has to decide what file to put it in. So in the case of a traumatic memory, our brain becomes overwhelmed and does not know what file that experience belongs in. Because of this, the memory is not stored in long-term memory. Instead, it stays in our short-term memory, which can cause us to be easily triggered in our day-to-day experience. So the way that I like to, again, explain it is that our little brains at night, we like file things away. So bad memories go in the bad memory place in our brain. Good memories go in good memories. Scary memories go in scary memories. But it's almost like when we have a trauma, the file is too intense. It's too thick. It's too big. So the brain doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, I don't know how to file this because it's too big. So instead of going into our little filing cabinet, and imagine it just, so it's just sitting in our in our inbox on our desk. And it's like, it's there and it's big. And every day we come to work, and instead of being in it filed away, we see it and it's just sitting there. And it can get triggered easily. And so what EMDR does is that it allows the brain to properly process and file away those memories to the place in our brain where just regular long-term memories are stored. So instead of just hanging out in the brain, the part of the brain where we get triggered and activated, so the person thinks that this is happening to me now. The person doesn't understand, the brain doesn't understand, no, that happened 5 years ago, because it hasn't been processed fully to our long-term memory. So I like to kind of give the example of I don't know if any women out there have given birth, but it's a common thing that a lot of people have gone through, or someone's broken a leg. I'll always say to somebody, it's like, imagine you can think about the memory of going back and giving birth or breaking a bone. And they'll say, okay, think about that and close your eyes and go retrieve that memory. And then people will be like, oh yeah, I remember that sucked. That was painful. But the difference is that when you think about that memory, you're not physically feeling the pain, or you're not, unless it was a traumatic experience, but for the most part, you're not physically going back and reliving that memory. It's just a memory. You're just like, yeah, that was painful. Yeah, that wasn't a good day. And that's the way that all sort of traumatic memories should feel like. They should feel like it is just a memory. You're not living in it anymore. You're detached from it. It's just it's less intense. It's foggy. It's just a memory. And so that's the way that, I kind of like to talk about what's kind of happening in our brain with our traumatic memories. Okay, so there's a very quick video that I'm going to share about how EMDR works. So I don't know if this is going to work because we're on YouTube. We'll try it. Like I said, we'll try this out and we'll see what happens here. Oh, I just have to make sure. Just want to make sure that the sound is okay. Just one sec here. I just want to make sure that just going to go down just one sec. I'm just going to go to YouTube for a second here and make sure that can you guys, if I share that video on here, is everyone able to actually hear it?
So there was no sound.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was wondering. I'm just wondering I don't know how to do that. Share sound. 1 sec here. Okay, I'm just gonna go back. I mean, if we don't have to, sharing. I know there's like a tab on Zoom. I mean, if we can't watch it, it's all good. People can just watch it. 1 sec here. Video mute. I'm sorry, you guys. Oh, share sound. Just let me know, Sarah, if you're able to hear this.
Yes, no,
Okay,
we can hear it.
okay, perfect. Sorry about that, guys. I'll just.
Those images are just stuck in my head.
My childhood was so bad with the abuse. I've been to therapy for years. I like my therapist, but nothing really changed.
I can't stand going out to bars or being around people. I drink alone. I think it used to make me feel better, but not anymore.
Since the attack, I feel numb. Had to leave school and work. My life just stopped.
These are the voices of people who have lived with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Sometimes PTSD can start right away after something happens, and other times it takes a while to notice symptoms. Either way, when a person has PTSD, it usually means that painful memories become a problem in a person's life. And that's when someone might need some help. But PTSD is a condition that can be treated. There are a few therapies that work especially well, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, is one. EMDR is an evidence-based treatment, which means it's been proven to be effective more often than most other types of therapy. During EMDR, a trained therapist works with a person to keep the sessions comfortable and relaxed, but also to achieve the goals they set together. Relaxation and breathing exercises might be taught early in the sessions, so they can be used later. People then talk about the memories that have been most difficult for them. While they're telling the stories of their trauma, they're also watching something right in front of them, such as moving lights or the tip of a pencil being waved back and forth. The repetitive eye movement can be distracting or calming, and telling the story becomes easier. This is desensitization. Next, the feelings that go with the memories of awful, traumatic moments, or years of traumatic moments, can change. Those feelings shift during therapy, and how people think about themselves in relation to their memories can be dramatically different following EMDR. This is reprocessing. The memories start to have far less power than they did before the treatment. The best news is that EMDR usually doesn't take that long. The feeling that a person is stuck in the past can change with EMDR. People with PTSD can become fully present and live their lives the way they intend. PTSD can be treated, and people can get back to the lives they want to live.
All right. So yeah, that was just a quick sort of video of kind of what we summed up. And I know a lot of people are always really interested in they're like, how does it work? I don't get it. What are these eye movements? So then the next little bit here of the last sort of bit of my presentation, we'll kind of answer a little bit more of the most common questions that I get and explain it in a little bit more detail. And then after I'll take questions that people have from the chat. Oh, I want to share that again. Okay, so what is EMDR therapy? So EMDR is stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So the first thing is the eye movement. So EMDR works with bilateral stimulation of our eyes. So that meaning it's like a back and forth motion. So it's moving our eyes back and forth. I don't know if you can see my eyes right now. I probably look kind of crazy, but so moving our eyes back and forth, back and forth. So therapists will have different ways of doing this. Like you can use something as plain as your finger. In my private practice, when people come to see me in person, I have a light bar. And it's like people are just like moving their eyes back and forth. I also I've been doing, obviously due to the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of online sessions. So I have a program where people, it's a computer program where it's just like there's a ball that moves back and forth. So we've even can use like bilateral taps as well. So sometimes I'll do what we would call butterfly tapping, or people can tap on their knees. I also have little buzzers that people can have. So it's anything that has this like back and forth, left, right, back and forth movement. So I think studies have shown that eye movements work best. But again, sometimes people have a hard time with eye movement. So we can do tapping or with buzzers or even sounds as well. So scientists don't exactly know, they don't know the exact mechanism of why it works, but they think that the eye movements have to do with when we're sleeping in REM sleep. And so that's when our eyes are moving back and forth. And that's when we're doing a lot of our processing of information, from the day. And so scientists think that the back and forth with the eye movements kind of mimics what's happening in REM sleep. So it's taking that unprocessed trauma that's stuck and stored in our body, and it's helping to process it to the right part of the brain where memories are stored. So eye movements, so desensitization removes any disturbance associated with the traumatic memory. So that's what I was meaning about when we think about a memory. We shouldn't have any physiological response in our body. So a memory should just be a memory. So like I said about remember a time when you, had a toothache or had to get a tooth pulled. Your body isn't physically remembering how scary it was, or again, unless it's an unprocessed trauma. But for the most part, right, where you just remember oh yeah, that kind of sucked, or so that's the way that a traumatic memory should feel. It should just feel yeah, that happened. It will never be a happy memory, but I'm not feeling it in my body. And then the last thing is reprocessing. So replacement of unhealthy negative beliefs associated with the traumatic memory with a more positive beliefs. And the way that I've sort of seen it's when we've detached ourselves from it, so when we can look at the memory from more of an objective view if we remember our hand model here, with more of our with our neocortex in place, we're able to kind of look at it and view it from a different perspective. So you'll look at it and people will be yeah, it wasn't my fault. I couldn't have prevented anything. There's nothing I could have done. I was a kid. Where it's because they're able to just view it differently when all the the disturbance, and we've settled down our limbic and our lizard brain response. So EMDR, again, is a type of psychotherapy and can be used for, so again, most common things are, trauma. So any type of, trauma that someone's had, PTSD, can be good for anxiety, panic disorders, sleep disturbances, flashbacks, shames, phobias, and more. So I mean, anytime that you kind of have a like sort of a physiological response about something, EMDR can be beneficial. It can be beneficial for, like relationship issues, like I said, like lots of different things. So if you're interested in wondering if EMDR is good for you, it's just best to, contact, therapists in your area, and who does EMDR, and just and do a consult just to make sure that it would be beneficial for you. So how long will it take to work? This is kind of like a question that I get all the time. And so while it's true that EMDR can be much faster than and get better results than traditional talk therapy, everyone is really different. And it really depends on someone's previous trauma history and their ability to emotionally regulate. So this is really important, this next one. So before we start any type of trauma work, so safety and stability. So as I was talking about, like, we're going to use my hand model again, where people have to be able to regulate their emotions and feel safe. Because if they're like constantly coming in, they've flipped their lid and they're just, living in their limbic and, lizard brain response, trauma therapy, it's not going to be safe for them, because they're going to go home from therapy and not have any way to relieve those symptoms. So I spend the first little bit of therapy with most people just ensuring that they're going to be safe, because when we get into the actual processing of the therapy, it can be really intense, and people have to have a way to be able to show that they can safely regulate their emotions in the therapy room, as well as when they're at home. So that's a really big thing. So if someone's come to me and they've done tons of therapy before and they're really grounded and they have a yoga practice and they know how to regulate, and they don't have a severe trauma history, it's it could be 1 or 2 sessions. On the other hand, if someone's had a whole life of childhood trauma that is more complex, and they've never had therapy before and they've never talked to anyone before, it can take a little bit longer. So it's something that definitely you need. There's no easy answer for that, but I usually say, like, if someone doesn't have a complex trauma history, usually on average, I'd say, like, again, this is sort of like a number that I like I usually say, like, for me, it's maybe around like 6 sessions, where someone comes in with a specific problem, I want to work on this, and we kind of do a history, do some safety, and then we get into the processing of the trauma. Maybe they have 1 or 2 memories. And again, it depends on how many memories people have. So, and this is an example of the dandy root analogy. So, and I'm going to use a case example of a client that I have, and I'll just call him Jim for confidentiality reasons. So Jim came and saw me because he was physically attacked by knife point. So he came and saw me, and he had severe PTSD, like really bad, like one of the like worst cases I've seen. Hypervigilant, couldn't, like, felt unsafe, was not doing well, couldn't sleep, every like very textbook type of PTSD symptoms. So we did a history, and he had a couple of other incidences in his life where he was he was attacked a year previously, and in his youth. So the way that our brains work, it kind of works on a circuit. So like I said, I like to imagine like a dandelion root. So if we imagine the flower is kind of like the issues that we see. So it's like, okay, the not sleeping, the hypervigilance, the flashbacks, the panic, the anxiety, the fear. And so that's kind of what someone comes in. This is like, the incident that caused it. So in Jim's case, the being assaulted by knife point. So if we are just to kind of come in and do EMDR on this incident, then another incident could come and happen again, and it would just he might be good for a while, but then something might happen and then he'd have similar symptoms. So the way that it works is that, so sometimes we have to make sure that, because the way that memories work in our brain is they're all connected in one file. So he might have had another file somewhere along the way in childhood where he didn't feel safe and he had a similar type of response, maybe not as extreme, but it's all connected. So in Jim's case, we did a thorough history. And again, he told me he had good parents and, didn't have any childhood trauma and, all of these things. And so we did a couple of other memories with him. But when we got to the current memory, it just was not getting any better. His level of distress was a 10, and it was a 10 and it wouldn't go down. And, this guy was just like, he was what I was called like flooding with emotion and just spiraling, and 2-3 sessions, and I started thinking like something else is kind of blocked, like there's something else there. So we decided to again like go back into his childhood, and we kind of discovered that he had a situation with his father where his father was very volatile and would yell at him and would scream at him, and his mom, and he would be in his in his bedroom, like hiding under the closet. And so it wasn't until we went back and we did that early memory when he was a little kid, and we did EMDR on that memory, then we were able to go back and do the current issue, and it probably cleared within a session or two, and he was like back to like normal, back to work, back to his regular self. So that's sort of an example that I was kind of using. If like, so sometimes the issue that we see that someone comes in with is just sort of like what would be the flower, and we have to go, we would need to see if there's a root cause to that. And then I always work my way from like the bottom, the root, so earliest memory, to kind of like the stem might be the worst, another traumatic memory someone's had. So we kind of work our way from the bottom up. I hope that makes sense to people. Okay, I already kind of covered this. How many sessions will I need? And yeah, so this sort of brings me to the end of my presentation. So if anyone is interested in, learning more about EMDR, I do offer 50-minute complimentary, just like information sessions, just to kind of see if it would be a good fit for you. Maybe you can give me a little bit of your history, and sort of maybe gain some tools to alleviate your trauma symptoms that you're currently having. So I know, like, I'm currently live in Kelowna. I know there's, people from all over BC. So I actually don't have this on here, but if you're looking for an EMDR therapist, the best way to do it would be to go on the so it would be EMDRIA, so EMDRIA website, and you can like look for someone who's trained in EMDR in your town. A lot of therapists, like I said, I do online EMDR, and I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't really know how I was going to go about doing that when this whole pandemic started, but we've definitely found a way to do it. I do it all the time. I mean, in my opinion, I still prefer in person, but I mean, due to kind of our limitations we've made it work. So I've had success with online as well. So that's always an option as well. But yeah, so if anyone wants any more information, my email is down here. So it's Tricia Veltri at gmail.com. And you can always as well message me through my website, and it's www.corehealingtherapy.ca. So that brings us to, so there's just a little quote that I'll say here. Oh, sorry. Sorry, my face is in the way. So trauma creates change you don't choose. So healing is about creating change you do choose. And, I'm hoping that I can give some hope to people that, like trauma doesn't have to be that, darkness, that shadow that forever follows you around in life. And, you can heal from it, and you can leave, you can get past your past, because that's what it is. It's just your past. It's just a memory. It doesn't have to haunt you. And like I said, EMDR is an amazing tool, and I've seen it work so many times for people that the results are just, and it's one of those things where like it never fails to amaze me how it works. And even after all of these years, it still gives me such joy to see, someone who something has haunted them and disturbed them for so long, to be like, it's not a big deal. And it's almost as though people like forget, like after a while, they forget that it was ever a big deal. And it feels weird to some people at first, because they've held on to this trauma or this memory or this event for so long in their life, and to finally to be free from it is pretty awesome. So I'm going to stop my screen right now and just see if there's any questions in the chat. So sorry, bear with me for a second. I'm new to this technology. And just see if there's, so yeah, if anyone has any questions right now, just put them in the chat. I'm hoping that I can see the chat. Okay, so I think I saw a question from, I think it was Ellie. I'm curious how EMDR gets to the root issue. So I think I talked about that. Like I said, so I do something what we call a float back. So so someone comes with their current target, and we would do what we call a float back. And we set it up. So EMDR is a very standardized therapy. So I always tell people, once you've done one session, like they're all set up very the same way. So to get to a core issue, so say someone would come to me with an example of, I'm having, anxiety when driving. So we would set that up of like, okay, so you have anxiety when you're driving. This is how you feel. This is what you think about anxiety, that you rate how you feel. And then we do sort of like a little kind of I don't want to say meditation, but sort of like a little, I get the person to relax and concentrate on what they're feeling, and just to kind of like bring up any memories where they felt anything like this. So then, and the earlier, the better. So the earlier memory that we can get for the core, the better for the person. So then maybe in the car accident, it was like, oh, well, when I was 5 years old, I was in a, car accident where I was with my family and we kind of went off the road. And then when I was 16, I was in a really bad accident. And then, there's this fender bender that I just had. So then we would go back and do the earliest memory first. And then, like I said before, then we work our way up to the other memories. Okay, so same with Ellie again. So complex PTSD is, the way that I would explain complex PTSD is that it's more, so we have different types of trauma. So we have our big T trauma, as I like to call it. So big T trauma is those traumatic events like death, threatened death, sexual violence, threatened sexual violence, wars, earthquakes, those things where you're literally were like your life or death. So that's what we call big T trauma. And then we call other things little t trauma. And little t trauma is it's not as intense, but it's highly stressful. So it's more things that may have happened in childhood. So childhood neglect, emotional abuse for people, bullying, where it's not necessarily life or death, but it's kind of crushed your sense of safety and security. And so for people that have had complex PTSD, they may have had very sort of chronically abusive childhoods, or maybe they've had, you know, a lot of emotional abuse. So it's just complex PTSD. It's just a little bit more complex than you know, maybe a PTSD that's just from an event of like one or two events in their lives. So it's almost like, you know, I'll have someone come in and they'll be like, I want to do EMDR, but like their whole childhood was like horrific. So it's just a little bit more complex. I don't know if I explain that right. Okay, so just taking a look here at other questions. Okay. Okay, well, that's about my. Okay, so Sabrina. Oh, is this more effective than tapping? And I don't know. So SS 2016. I'm not like, I know tapping with it's like emotional freedom technique, and you know what? And I'm the type of person that I believe that if something works for you, then use it. Like I don't think that there's a one. Let me see my face. I don't think that there's a one model fits all for anything in life. So if something works for you and tapping is effective, then use it. And I'm very much holistic in my approach to healing. So I think we really need to work on, you know, body, mind, spirit, emotional health, physical health, spiritual health. So, you know, I think healing comes from an integrative approach. So, you know, if tapping is something that, you know, works, then by all means, I think integrate it into your therapy approach. Okay. Last little questions here. Let's see here. What if you have Sabrina says, what if you have flashbacks or you think or recollections of trauma? Can EMDR help with remembering and processing it? Have symptoms of being on guard, holding breath, hard connecting. What if your flashbacks or so the thing with trauma, as I always tell people, like sometimes our brain doesn't if your brain has registered something as traumatic as a child or something, it doesn't matter if it was not true or if we've made it up or there's pieces of it. It's just like that's registered to us. So, I mean, if you're having flashbacks, so the thing with doing EMDR is sometimes it can bring up other memories that people have repressed. And that's another big thing with EMDR. It's trauma is complex. So if someone is dissociative, they need a little bit more preparation work to do EMDR. So if people do have the ability, like, or should I say, use if people are dissociative and they seem to repress some of their memories or not remember things, that's sort of an indication to me that it's just somebody that would need more preparation and safety implementation put in place before we go and start processing. Okay. Can this be useful if you have trauma around an eating disorder or self-image? So yes, Hillary. Yes, for sure. Eating disorders, yeah, 100%. Like there'd be a root cause to that. You know, most people that do have eating disorders have experienced trauma. It's a way of, control, and it's a way of dealing with, emotions that come up. So yes, I would say definitely. And self-image, yes. Okay, so again, I'll just put the EMDR. So you can just Google, I'm gonna put that in the chat. So EMDR website. That's where you could find someone, like I said, local. I'm from Kelowna, so that I'm not sure if people, again, if you're interested, I am taking on new clients. I do have there might be a bit of a wait list, but if not, you can always find someone who from the EMDR website. I'll just put that in the chat there. And like I said, people do it online as well. Any final questions? And if not, I will give it back to Sarah. All right. Well, then I'll give it back to Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you for bearing with me as I did my very first online YouTube. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you having me here.
Thank you so much, Tricia. It was great presentation. And I'll just check another time. Oh, someone asked, is this covered by health benefits?
Oh, yeah. So definitely. So they always tell people everyone's health benefits. So if you have an extended health plan, yes, but everyone's extended health plans are a little bit different. So for example, I'm a clinical counselor. So if you're covered by a clinical counselor, then yes, it would be covered.
Great.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I don't see any questions anymore. Yes. So I'm going to end the meeting.
Awesome.
And so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you, Choices, for having me. It was a good experience. Thanks.
You are very welcome. And thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a good night.